Okay, we'll get started. Okay, we'll start with a short Jai Radha Madhava and then move forward from there. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Yamuna Tira Anachari Tira Anachari Yamuna Tira Anachari Tira Anachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Jaya Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayat. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 2, Text 40. And we'll do a little call and response to start off. This is in the Brahma Samhita meter. It's fun to chant. I'll just run through it once and then we could have some repetitions. Matsyashva Kachapana Shingha Varaha Hamsa Rajanya Vipravid Vibudhesha Kritavataraha Tvampasi Nastri Bhuvanam Chayatha Tunesha Bharam Bhuvo Hara Yuduttamai Vandanam Te. Anybody like to chant? Also online. It's a little difficult. Okay. We'll just go on to the word for word. Matsya, the fish incarnation. Ashva, the horse incarnation. Kachapa, the tortoise incarnation. Nrsimha, the Nrsimha incarnation. Varaha, the Varaha incarnation. Hangsa, the swan incarnation. Rajanya, incarnations as Lord Ramchandra and other Kshatriyas. Vipra, incarnations as Brahmanas like Vamana Dev. Vibudhesha, among the demigods. Krita Avataraha, appeared as incarnations. Tvam, your lordship. Pasi, please save. Naha, us. Tribhuvanam cha, and the three worlds. Yata, as well. Adhuna, now. Isha, O Supreme Lord. Bharam, burden. Bhuvaha, of the earth. Hara, please diminish. Yadu Uttama, O Lord Krishna, best of the Yadus. Vandanam te, we offer our prayers unto you. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Bhakti Srila A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. O Supreme Controller, your Lordship previously accepted incarnations as a fish, a horse, a tortoise, Nrsimhadev, a boar, a swan, Lord Ramchandra, Parashuram, and among the demigods, Vamanadev, to protect the entire world by your mercy. Now please protect us again by your mercy, by diminishing the disturbances in this world. O Krishna, best of the Yadus, we respectfully offer our obeisances unto you. Purport. In every incarnation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has a particular mission to execute, and this was true in his appearance as the son of Devaki in the family of the Yadus. Thus, all the demigods offered their prayers to the Lord, bowing down before him, and requested the Lord to do the needful. We cannot order the Supreme Personality of Godhead to do anything for us. We can simply offer him our obeisances, as advised in Bhagavad Gita, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, and pray to him for annihilation of dangers. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadatai Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunnavadi Pashtata Deshatine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, verse again, O Supreme Control, your Lordship previously accepted incarnations as a fish, a horse, a tortoise, Nrsingadev, a boar, a swan, Lord Ramchandra, Parashuram, and among the demigods, Vamanadev, to protect the entire world by your mercy. Now please protect us again by your mercy, by diminishing the disturbances in this world. O Krishna, best of the Yadus, we respectfully offer our obeisances unto you. I respectfully offer my obeisances unto everybody on this call, especially Arjuna Prabhu, Adipusha Prabhu, everybody in the temple room. Please pray that I can say something in line with Shastra and that is somehow enlivening to the devotees. Thank you very much. So one of the first things I noticed about this verse is the demigods are asking for a kind of benediction, diminishing the disturbances in this world. And in one sense, there's nothing wrong with that because, when there's disturbances, it's a lot more difficult to perform spiritual activities because it's a lot harder to chant if you're on an empty stomach generally, unless you're at a high level, but otherwise, if we're having to deal with different material disturbances, spiritual life becomes very difficult. But at the same time, we understand that the highest understanding of bhakti is this idea of savai pumsam puro dharmo yatta bhakti doksajay ahitaki yapratiyata yayatma supersediti, completely unmotivated devotional service, which means we have no inkling of selfishness in what we're doing. It's actually purely out of love for Krishna. So we've been traveling for so many billions and billions of lifetimes in different material worlds. And the whole time we've been completely absorbed in selfishness. In the sense that we are convinced that by being selfish, we'll become happy. And so everything we do, every thought we think to some degree is motivated by this selfishness. And so now we're attempting to basically do the impossible and completely reverse that and attain prema, Krishna prema, where you're actually completely free from any tinge of a desire for selfishness, this ahitaki bhakti, where you're actually completely pure and you only are operating on a level of love for Krishna. So it is actually impossible. We actually can't do it on our own. That is, we need mercy in order to be able to do it. And so how to get the mercy? Well, Krishna says, Sarvadharma pradhyagya mame kam sharanam vaja. That by surrendering unto him, then he takes away all of this, all of our worries, which of course for spiritualists, this is a big one, becoming pure. But it's very difficult to surrender. I'm sure at least I myself have experienced to actually fully surrender. But it comes down to something a lot more simple than what we may think it to be. It actually comes down to accepting things that are favorable and rejecting things that are unfavorable. And that seems quite simple. And anybody who's honest can figure out, okay, this is favorable, that's unfavorable. But still, it's easier said than done. So I was moved by this verse and purport I read in the Bhagavatam yesterday, in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavatam, that references this point, what it actually means to accept something favorable and reject something unfavorable. So ultimately that's difficult, when it comes down to it, to actually deny ourselves immediate gratifications for the long-term pleasure of Krishna, and just for Krishna's pleasure. It can be quite difficult. In that sense, it's a kind of penance. So this verse kind of speaks to that. It goes, Yadyesho padata devi maya vaisha radi mati sampana iveti vidur mahimni swe mahiyate. If the illusory energy subsides and the living entity becomes fully enriched with knowledge by the grace of the Lord, then he becomes at once enlightened with self-realization and thus becomes situated in his own glory. And from the purport, you see, he can turn, this is referencing Krishna, he can turn the external energy into the internal by his will. So again, this whole idea of impossibility, right? Going from selfishness to prema, it's impossible actually, but Krishna has the power. He can turn external energy into internal by his will. right? So therefore, by his grace, the external energy which is employed in illusioning those living beings who want to have it subsides by the will of the Lord. Now, this is the kicker here. Subsides by the will of the Lord in terms of the repentance and penance of the conditioned soul. So repentant, these are almost kind of like you hear like more in reference to Catholicism, these terms repentance and penance, but they're also very applicable to Krishna consciousness. And particularly this idea of penance, it means to accept some difficulty, some hardship for the purpose of getting closer to God ultimately, and in some ways apologize, you could say, for your mistakes. You're repenting, you're doing penance for this reason. And so this whole idea of accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable, it's uncomfortable at first. At least it's a little it could be a little kind of disconcerting for somebody who is just starting out, especially like myself. But by that act, in those moment-to-moment dealings that we're going through on a day-to-day basis, if somehow or other we can reject the things unfavorable, whatever it might be, and we can bear that poison in the short term, then in the long term, we can experience a lot of benefit. It's not just some kind of mathematical equation either, but we see here that Krishna sees this penance that we're undergoing, these little victories we're having on a day-to-day basis, rejecting things unfavorable, being honest. And he within the heart then sees that, and he cleanses us. And of course, this is another great verse from the Bhagavatam that justifies this claim. Shrundatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana vedantakstoha bhadrani vidhunoti sarhitsatam. The Sri Krishna, who is the Paramatma, the super soul in the heart of everybody, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee. If one's actually honest and is seeing, this is good for me, I'm going to do this. This is bad for me, I'm not going to do that. Krishna sees that discernment going on. And when he does, when he's the benefactor of the truthful devotee, so it says, he cleanses a desire for material enjoyment from the heart of one who has thus developed the urge to hear his messages simply by this honesty and acting on that honesty. Right? So again, we can't do it on our own. It doesn't matter if we're chanting 64 rounds, if we're distributing 64 books a day, if we're going out on Harinam for 64 hours a month, or whatever it might be. But Krishna sees the honesty in our heart, if we're actually being true to ourselves and making a sincere attempt to do the right thing, according to what we've heard from our spiritual masters and from Srila Prabhupada. If he sees that, then it says he cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from our heart. It's not like a power wash, where we're getting off the dirt ourselves necessarily, but by our sincere endeavor, that's when Krishna steps in and he can actually immediately cleanse us, right? I mean, we know so many examples of this in the Bhagavatam, especially Narada Muni, who he of course came in contact with the sages, and from their association he took up devotional service. His mother passed away untimely. He went to the forest, started performing devotional service, and then from his sincere efforts that Krishna saw, his humble heart, his purity, then he got darshan of Vishnu. Vishnu appeared to him, right? And then what happened? Then he disappeared. And then Narada Muni said, oh my God, what happened? And he immediately jumped back into his hardcore meditation he was doing, but didn't work. He was applying just as much, if not more, intensity in his meditation, but still no, Krishna did not reappear. But then finally he did appear, and he said, you're not going to see me again in this lifetime, but by your endeavor, by your longing for me, by me seeing in your heart that this is your desire to have me and me alone, then eventually you will attain me. But we can understand from that it's not based on our endeavor so much. It's based on the sincere attempt. Krishna sees that, and then everything comes from there. So this is the process of surrender. It's just this day-to-day penance, accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable. And even if we fail along the way, it's okay. right? Because ultimately, um, it's not the acts themselves, it's not the endeavor itself, but it's actually this sincere heart, as Gurangi could tell us, Apichat Sudaracharo, Vajate Mam Nandibak, that if you're properly situated in your determination, in your devotional service, even if every now and then you have a little bit of a slip up, Krishna sees the heart, and he takes that over everything else. But of course, there's one instance specifically we know where Krishna, or at least Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself, um, rejected a devotee because of a slip up. And it was specifically the story of Junior Haridas, who was in the renounced order, but who looked at a woman lustfully and then was continuing to hold his position. And Lord Chaitanya said, I can't even stand to look at somebody like this, who is posing as somebody who's in this higher order of spiritual life, but under the behind closed doors is actually maintaining these lusty desires and being ingenuine. Basically, Lord Chaitanya rejected him. Right? So we could understand that again. It comes down really the crucial aspect of at least one of the crucial aspects of our journey is this honesty, this level of how honest we're being with ourselves. One time, there was a big GBC meeting. I believe it was in the 80s, and everybody was taking sannyas at the time. Lots of new sannyasis were popping up. And so they were all there, and some other, high-ranking devotees were there as well. And it was this kind of gathering in a room. And then Ravindra Sarup Prabhu walked in. And then so one of them jokingly said, when are you going to take sannyas? And he said, actually, I prefer to stay renounced. So yeah, it brings up this idea is what is real renunciation? Is it just wearing a certain color cloth? Of course not. It's actually having this humble, honest mood in which you're not so much attached to a given title, a given position, a given status, a given way in which people look at you, but you're attached to your service and doing whatever it takes um, to better your service, to carry out the order of your spiritual master, whether that means giving lectures in front of thousands of people or washing garbage bins, right? We have to have somehow or other, we have to cultivate that level of honesty, sincerity, humility. And the funny thing is that's where the real bliss and pleasure and satisfaction actually lies. Again, millions, billions of births, we've been conditioned otherwise, thinking that we'll get that happiness from selfishness. But as we progress in Krishna consciousness and we come to terms with reality, we gradually begin to realize that real happiness doesn't come from that. It actually comes from tapo divyam puchika yena sattvam sudyadhyasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. By accepting this penance, this little austerity for the pleasure of our spiritual master, for Srila Prabhupada, for Lord Chaitanya, that's where real happiness comes from. And of course, that shouldn't be our goal to get this happiness, but after all, we're pleasure-seeking living entities by nature. Like my spiritual master says, I brought this up before, but jivas just want to have fun. Maybe some of us know the song, but jivas are like that. We're the female energy of the Lord. So we just want to have fun. So the question isn't necessarily how to get rid of that desire. It's actually impossible because it's part of our nature. That's part of it, to want to have fun. But it's where is that fun actually coming from? So we understand, Shastra tells us, it comes from pure devotional service. So that should be our main goal. So yes, we're trying to surrender by the process of accepting things favorable and rejecting things unfavorable. This is Krishna's demand to us, that we actually surrender to him. And then by that act, by that continuous act on a day-to-day basis, then we become advanced spiritually. We forge our relationship with Krishna We develop actual deep love for him. And at that point, then we're no longer so much attracted to material life. But it's still difficult. And again, it's easy to say accepting is favorable, rejecting is unfavorable. When it comes down to it, it's not always so easy. But luckily, Lord Chaitanya does not demand. This is one of Prabhupada's ecstasies that he was meditating on in an arrival address in Atlanta. That he doesn't demand that we surrender. He's so kind. Prabhupada is so moved by this point. He's so kind. We simply take shelter of Lord Chaitanya by accepting his instructions. And in that way, then we will get the same result as if we had the utsahan to fully surrender, the adhikar to fully surrender to Krishna. So what is that instruction? Trinadapi sunichena taror ivas hishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sudahavi, that we take on this mood more humble than the blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, ready to offer all respects to others, and very importantly, not expecting any respect for oneself. And in that mood, that's when we can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. And what does that mean, though, to be able to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly? It means we're receiving the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, because otherwise, what could we really, by our mental strength, somehow we'd be able to? No, of course not. And again, when Lord Chaitanya sees this mood, this authenticity, this sincere desire to be humble, to be tolerant, to not desire any respect for oneself, but simply give it to one and all, that's when we attract him. That's what he becomes attracted to, this clean heart, or at least this gundicha marjanam, this attempt to clean the heart. That's what attracts Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And from that mercy, then everything comes. So that was one of his instructions. There are many others. Ashishiva pararitam panashtamam adarshanam marmahatam karotuva yatatata va vidatato lampato matpranya natastusa eva na paraha. Also develop this mood of, I know no one but you, Krishna, is my Lord, and you shall remain so. Even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, or make me brokenhearted by not being present before me. You're completely free to do anything and everything, for you're always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. So this mood of tatenu kampam susanipshamano, ugane vatmakatam vipakam vidvagvaporbir vidadana maste jivetyo mukti pade sadayubak, that it doesn't matter what happens to me, I'm going to remain your servant. I'm going to be constantly offering my obeisances to you and ready to carry out your instructions no matter what you throw at me by your loving grace. I will retain this mood. So these things are available to us, and that we may not always so grossly be able to reject the unfavorable things and accept the favorable things, even though to a large extent we can, if we're honest with ourselves. We can make a humble attempt to imbibe these moods and be honest and be conscious of where our minds are going when we encounter either somebody who appears to be disrespecting us, or we get put into a difficult situation. We can clock to what extent we are trying to imbibe these moods. And if we're just sincerely trying to imbibe those moods, then we'll also become qualified for Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And as it says in that verse, that Lord Brahma spoke, to attain the kingdom of God. So we have a 99% discount here in Kali Yuga. We no longer have to meditate underwater or perform intense yagyas or austerities for thousands of years. We simply chant Hare Krishna in this humble and tolerant mood, make a sincere attempt at humility and tolerance, and especially one of Lord Chaitanya's most prominent instructions that Bhakti Siddhanta honed in on, especially, and of course our Srila Prabhupada, by my command, become guru and save this land. By my command, become guru, save this land. Bhakti Siddhanta in that Vyas Puja address he gave, he was saying, "Who am I?" He was admonishing himself. Look at me. What am I? Some zoo animal in the gardens, the zoo gardens that people have come to look at and admire. He said, "I'm just, that's the way he was thinking of himself." But he said, "But somehow or other, I cannot commit the offense of insincerity, of dishonesty, and fail to carry out the clear-cut order of my spiritual master and of Lord Chaitanya, which is to become guru and to spread his teachings far and wide as far as possible." And so similarly, in our endeavors to become spiritual, we shouldn't commit the mistake of thinking that we shouldn't become a spiritual master in our own way. That's our duty, actually, as followers in this line of Lord Chaitanya, to become bona fide representatives of our spiritual master and spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya as they've come down through Srila Prabhupada and through our spiritual masters. Currently, it's become a bit of a fad to bypass that in some way, and instead of repeating what we've heard from our spiritual master, go ahead, do our own research, and if it doesn't line up with what they've said, then to present it in a different way and say, well, this is what I've gathered from my research and this is what someone else has gathered. But this is not what our spiritual masters have done. It's not what Srila Prabhupada has done. Srila Prabhupada again and again emphasized this point. We're simply representing, we're simply repeating what we've heard from our spiritual master. There's no need to complicate it any further than that if we really are honest with ourselves, right? That works. At the end of the day, we could speculate, think, maybe this will work better, maybe that, but this is the tried and true process, simply repeating what we've heard from our spiritual master. So Prabhupada emphasized this point again and again, to keep it simple as far as possible. There's nothing wrong with doing our own research and diving into certain topics in a way that satisfies our heart. But when it comes to our ultimate conclusions and the way we present those conclusions to others, they should always be in direct, very clear connection with what our spiritual masters are teaching, what Srila Prabhupada has presented. So that's a big aspect of what it means to become spiritual master, right? Because people can take that in so many different ways, this idea of by my command, become guru, save this land. But that's a very important aspect of it, simply repeating what we've heard from our spiritual master and without changing it unnecessarily. So yes, Lord Chaitanya is extremely merciful. As we understand, he's come in this almost like avadut bhav. They broke open the storehouse of love of God, and they're distributing its contents extremely widely without any consideration of who's fit and who's unfit. But there are two pitfalls which could potentially bar us from that mercy to some degree. One, we've already mentioned, this idea of posing as something that we're not, posing as an advanced devotee, presenting ourselves externally, accepting praise, and being insincere ultimately. It said, the example is given of drinking water underwater on a fast day. You go to the Ganga and it's a Nirjala Ekadashi. Yes, I'm following Nirjala, you're following Nirjala. Yes, I am too. And then when you're under the water, then glub, 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 you have some drink and then you come back up and oh yeah, I'm still following Nirjala, of course. And, so this is one of the things Lord Chaitanya specifically warned us against. This is one of the reasons, this is the reason he rejected Junior Haridas. The other is of course offending devotees, not just devotees actually, but people in general. Like in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, it says all of one's pious activities, all of one's worship of Vasudeva is considered useless if one offends even an ordinary living entity, if one's inconsiderate, then all one's worship of the Lord is considered useless. Right? That's how we define a Kanishta Adhikari, somebody who is worshiping the Lord directly, but not giving proper respect to everybody else, not seeing how God, not only that God is in the heart of every living entity, but also that God loves every living entity. Right? Prabhupada describes in that verse, the purport to 1217, that Krishna is more eager for us to come back to him, us, not just us here in the temple, but the living entities. He's more eager for us to come back to him than we could even imagine, right? And so we should never commit the offense of offending living entities. What to speak of Vaishnavas, of devotees? What to speak of those who have dedicated their lives to propagating the holy name of the Lord? We should be very, very careful in that regard. Otherwise, it's so easy to go so many decades, so many lifetimes in Krishna consciousness and still be wondering, why am I not tasting anything ever when I'm chanting japa? Why is Bhagavatam class boring for me still? Why am I not feeling any love for my spiritual master? These are the things. This is one of the main things. If we're not very conscious of the way we're interacting with others, especially other devotees, we're committing offenses, then they'll serve as bumpers, as big roadblocks that will be very difficult to overcome. So those two things are the things we have to worry about. Other than that, the idea of cultivating this mood of Trinadapi Sunichena, being humble, being tolerant, we just try our best. Again, Krishna sees the honest attempt. This Shrunvatam Swakata Krishna, he's in the heart of every living entity, and he sees the honesty, he sees the attempt, and he cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of one who's developed the urge to hear his messages by this sincerity, by this process. So we accept things favorable, we reject things favorable, we make that honest, sincere attempt. We live on the edge a little bit, of course, we're going according to our adhikar, but it's explained we should always be just on the edge. We should always ride the edge a little bit, in the sense that we're not just hanging back and yes, we're trying our best in our own little way, but we are steadily trying to move forward and advance our Krishna consciousness in some way, not becoming comfortable, but always being a little bit outside of our comfort zone in our services, in our sadhana, and these things. So we're in that way, we're accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable. We're developing this mood of humility, of tolerance, and especially this mood of, I know no one but you, Krishna, as my Lord, and you shall remain so, even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, or make me brokenhearted by not being present before me. This idea that Krishna is free to do anything and everything, for he's always our worshipful Lord unconditionally. So those are some thoughts on this verse. And I think we have a good amount of comments, and we could address those now. Questions, comments? Oh, Alan, go ahead.
Okay, I was just wondering, you were saying the word like, no, we're not perfect. Like, what about a person who says, okay, I'm going to do the best I can, but this is the best I can. I'm not going to be perfect. So, like, for example, I'll try to give an example. Like someone with a problem getting up early in the morning.
Alan, come a little closer. We can't hear you. We want to hear your example.
Okay, somebody who decides has a problem getting up in the morning. It's difficult for them. And they'll say,
Yeah.
all right, I'm not going to do that. It's too difficult. But I'll say the chant. I'll do the chanting later in the day, and I'll do something in the evening. I mean, is that problematic? Like a person, all right, I really can't do this, or are you supposed to really make that effort to try to conquer that problem?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, I just remember the story Adi Purushvaru told. It's a little graphic. I probably shouldn't give the full thing, but the principle behind it is by steady degrees, we can make progress also. And so it's not necessarily that we have to jump to waking up for Brahma Muhurta, but we can arrange our life in such a way that we can wake up early. This is one of the key aspects of Vaidhi Bhakti. There are certain things where it's not so essential that we have to do it just like that, but Prabhupada has explained, and our acharyas have explained, that waking up early and chanting our rounds and taking shower, chanting rounds, purifying the consciousness is a key aspect of Vaidhi Bhakti, which ultimately leads to Raganuga Bhakti. So this is one of those things where we should make an attempt to do it. In terms of how to do it, a lot of times it comes down to arranging our schedule. So one of the aspects my spiritual master hones in on is this idea that everything we do should be tailored to chanting our best rounds that we can. And so part of that is it's waking up early, because the earlier we wake up, the more time we have where we don't have to do anything. So the best way to do that in a practical sense is figure out exactly how many hours of sleep you need, and then make sure, arrange your life in such a way that you can get to bed on time, so that you get those hours of sleep, and then you're fully refreshed and focused and ready for the day. My spiritual master for a long time had 2 alarm clocks. And so one would be set for the time like 5 minutes before he wanted to wake up, and it was kind of like a soft one. And then another one would be on the other side of the room, or like another part of on the hallway or something. And it was really loud and abrasive. And he knew if he didn't wake up for the first one, then he would have to deal with the second one. And so then he would get out of bed that way. So there's ways we can be inventive and make sure we carry out certain aspects of Vaidhi Bhakti that are really important. So getting up early is one of them for sure. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. This is Gail. Yeah, this class was like, Krishna's direct response to my heart. It was so encouraging. And just to confirm, I think you were saying that a definition of surrender is simply trying to come up to the standard of whatever it is Krishna wants us to do, just being committed to trying. Would you say that that's a fair definition of surrender?
Yeah, trying definitely. And I guess, yeah, for me, I was just breaking it down into more specific terms of, this is coming from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's 6 limbs of Sharanagati. And so we have accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable. If we're sincerely trying to do that, then it's like we're on a bus, that's going to Goloka Vrindavan, in a sense. That by adhering to that equation, I'm going to accept things favorable, I'm going to reject things unfavorable, then gradually we'll make progress towards full surrender and to Krishna Prema. So yes, that honestly trying, I'd add, being very honest with ourselves if we are doing our best, and if we could be doing more. By that sincere heart, then everything will come.
Yeah, so this definition makes me realize that actually, just like the word devotee has different connotations, it could mean a pure devotee, it could just mean somebody who's aspiring to be a devotee. This word surrender seems to have a similar kind of spectrum to it, A person can consider themselves surrendered, even though they're not fully surrendered, just because they're trying to get to that point of being fully surrendered. Right?
Yeah, that's a big part of the Bhagavatam for me. You see these devotees who are fully surrendered, and then that way we have a standard. We have something that we know we can try and live up to.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we could just be like, yeah, this is good enough for me, and it's good enough for him. But when we have these examples like Prabhupada and so many of all of our acharyas and people, the devotees in the Bhagavatam, then we are forced to come to grips with the fact that this is the standard that we should ultimately be striving for.
Mm,
So
mhm.
yes.
I just wanted to just thank you for that. I just wanted to make one last point to Alan's issue. You know, what I've heard lately is, yeah, okay, you may not be able to wake up at Brahma Muhurta, but like you said, you know, you can do it in degrees. So if you're accustomed to waking up at like 8 o'clock, you can just try for like 7:45, you know, and then, you know, maybe in a month, try 7:30. You know, it can happen gradually. Doesn't have to be an all or nothing deal.
Yeah, Prabhupada, mute that.
What am I doing?
Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada told Shyam Sundar Prabhu when he was carving Jagannath, just smoke one less cigarette a day, and then in time the problem will be eradicated. So that's the idea, is by degrees, slow degrees. Again, we're just living a little bit on the edge, not getting too comfortable, a little bit pushing forward, and then naturally over time, then there's a big change. So thank you. Hadi.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Anyway, the 12-step meetings, they say, my mind is like a danger, God bless you, like a dangerous neighborhood. You shouldn't go there alone, right? My mind is how I got here. So just going by my own evaluation of how I'm doing is not very intelligent. Therefore, scripture says, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, approach a genuine spiritual master, inquire submissively and render service. So we ask, what is my service? If we have relationship with Guru, or as it's mainly arranged these days, sometimes the Guru says, figure out what service you can do. And then we offer the service to the Guru or the Guru's representative, who's our local outlet. And we say, how is this? Every Olympic athlete, although he's tremendously austere and dedicated person pushing himself, he accepts a coach. The coach doesn't go on the playing field and play the game, but you go to the coach and say, how is this? How am I doing? And Prabhupada said, you know, do you need, they were asking Prabhupada, why do we need a live spiritual master? Why do we need an authority? Why do we need a temple president or a department head or, and Prabhupada held the devotee by the ear a little bit and wiggled his ear and said, if I wasn't here, who would do this? Right? In other words, there's someone who's evaluating our effort and who's saying, very good, or come on now, you can do better than that. So it's very dangerous to keep yourself distant from the spiritual master, outside of the association of someone who you're looking up to. When I have the service of giving class, I always ask Arjun, how is the class? I don't trust my own judgment, because there's got to be somebody who knows better than me. There's always room for improvement. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, in every endeavor, there is some flaw, just as fire is covered by smoke. So there's always room for improvement. And it's better to have, the Chinese expression is guten guanghuo. Guten guanghuo means someone who's looking at the fire from across the river. He's not in the middle of the fire. In the middle of our own life, we may not be able to properly evaluate ourselves with our own limited intelligence or our own mind, which basically goes, I like this, I don't like that, I like this, I don't like that. But the Guru knows how to squeeze us a little bit. And Prabhupada said, pressure makes diamonds. You take a piece of coal and you put it under pressure for 1,000 years and it becomes a diamond. So that training, that instructions, that outside my own evaluating capacity, that personality, who were trying to serve and say, how is this? Anupama was telling me that if I should shake Prabhu, he's accepted initiation. So he is accountable, telling him how many pages I read today, right? What else? What else do you have to say?
Number of pages you read. My spiritual master has us do something called Sadhana Cards, which basically means every day you log what time you woke up, how many rounds you chanted, how many pages of Prabhupada's books you read, or minutes, depending on how you do it, and what services you did, what time you went to sleep. And so yeah, that way you're accountable, and it helps become more.
And this is not someone making himself out to be a tin god in your life to lord over you and coerce you and manipulate you, and it's care, it's love. And like you were quoting, it's appropriate in human life to accept austerity. For a human being, it's appropriate to voluntarily accept austerity in the service of the Lord to purify our existence, because we want to make progress. We don't want to just become complacent and get stuck. Even when we listened to a class here a few years ago, right here in this room, where Prabhupada said, don't get stuck in deity worship. And I was like, what? And he wanted us to go out. He wanted us to do something beyond our own sadhana and our own, caring for our own spiritual life. And we read that verse that says there's a distinction between religious activities, which are meant for your own advancement in your own comfort and safety, and religious activities that are in devotional service to the Lord. Service means serving someone, not just vaguely service, whatever I feel like, whenever I feel like, however much I want, and then what have you got? You become complacent. Anyway, maybe I'm talking too much. Please, anybody else who has something to say, we're grateful to hear.
Yes, there's
Angela,
Angie. So whoever raised the hand first, please go.
Hare Krishna, Anupama, Das Prabhu. Thank you so much for the class. I was actually going to give my feedback in terms of Angel's question. Now we've had a whole discussion with it. I was just wondering in terms of the idea of when people are asking us, like, if they can't do the whole like waking up early in the morning and things of that sort. I've heard other Prabhupada disciples kind of make the distinction that it's important to be careful in terms of our language when we're speaking to others, in terms of using like the word standard, for example, because the standard implies that if you can't do it, then you're substandard, and it just like puts the person into a negative space where they may feel like, well, then what's the point? Like if I can't do it, then just quit. And it kind of gives that, I think Gail was talking about like the zero or nothing, where you kind of get into that mindset that if you can't achieve it, then why even try? So it can be a little bit challenging depending on the mentality of the person, how new they are, if they're feeling supportive or things of that sort. So a lot of times what I've heard other Prabhupada disciples use is the word ideal. So it's like something that you want to reach for, but as Gail was saying, it's like a gradual process, and we kind of have to go with where each person is at their time. Like just for a personal example, like I really want to wake up early, and a lot of times I can achieve that and do my chanting, but depending on my health or other circumstances, there's times when I don't. And before I would beat myself up and be like, well, then, I didn't do it at the right time. So, then I'm just, maybe I'm not going to do it, and da-da-da. And then I realized, in talking to senior disciples that wasn't helping myself. Like if I was going to give up and not chant at all, that wasn't helpful. So just kind of being compassionate with ourselves and with others, and understanding that if you can't achieve that ideal, that it's okay to still, chant your rounds throughout the day. And at least, you're remembering Krishna and just remembering that essence, right? That the essence of Bhakti is remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna. And if we can do that in our own little way, then that's what Krishna wants us to do. I mean, he's happy to accept a flower or water. So just kind of having that compassion and remembering time, place, and circumstance for each person can be different.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the secret ingredient is always going to be honesty. We have to be honest with ourselves and to do our best based on that. Thank you. Angel.
Yeah. So I came with one little thought, and then Adi spoke, and oh my goodness, so many more thoughts. I'll try. He started to touch on what I was gonna say. So I have a saying that if you can't get in through the front door, try and use the back door. You know, we're looking at like doing these things from a displeasurable place, and that may leave like a vacuum. And this is what Adi started talking about, was we need to add in that goodness. And so sometimes the surrender isn't, okay, I'm going to stop the things that are bad, but it's, I'm going to add in all these things that are really good. I get to have delightful morning conversations with wonderful people over culture and music and ethics and spirituality and divinity. And this is perhaps more of a positive light of, I'm just going to give in. If you can't beat them, join them, right? So this one of my spiritual teachers, she teaches about goddesses. This is part of how I came to know Radha. She says, don't worry about, she also teaches a lot about food. She says, don't worry about giving up the chips and the soda. Have your vegetables and really love them. Have your vinegars, enjoy your bitters. Now that bitters thing, they're not enjoyable, but find a way to enjoy them. So if you can't get in through the front door and just go, I'm going to get up early, try and go in through the back door. Find something worth getting up early for. I like to sit in my shower playing with my rubber duckies. Make it fun.
Yeah, very beautiful. Thank you. Yes, I mean, Krishna consciousness is probably the most joyful, blissful, ecstatic, spiritual path that anybody could ever imagine. So thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, of course, we should be having fun in our spiritual life. It's not any actually doom and gloom, but it said that austerity. Oh, go ahead.
I want to try and say this in a slightly different way. My brain came to it. So with my children, they sleep too much because they're not active enough. You have to get up and do the things. If you're not actually doing the things, you don't have that burning off of any energy, so you're not tired. So you don't have a reason to want to relax. You have to take part. You have to show up.
Yeah. Oh, really quick.
Yes, I just wanted to add that not just by, it's not by our efforts alone that we get to where we want to get, it's by mercy also. So just by literally trying your best to maybe wake up early in the morning, Krishna sees that endeavor and so helps you. So
A little lower, Adipusha. Lower.
you,
Lower your camera.
Right.
Yes. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So it's good that you know what you have to attain, that is the standards, right? And then you strive towards that. And whilst you're doing that, help comes. Krishna helps you to get there. So it's better to know what to achieve and then strive for it, rather than just setting our own standards that this is what I can do, right? Because the more we push ourselves, like Prabhu was saying, that we always at the limits, pushing ourselves a little bit forward, and the help comes. And I can say that in my own experience that it helps a lot. Hare Krishna.
Anyway, they say that like with a stringed instrument, if you make the string too tight, it will break. And if it's too loose, it's just this flabby thing. So and Krishna is pleased, like he said, so important. Krishna is pleased if we try our humble best. That's our real criteria. If we have that sincerity, We have that endeavor. We know what we're trying for. And like we mentioned before, it's good to have someone else as I called Chandrasekhar Maharaj and Dhanadhar Maharaj and people I look up to. We listen to Vaisheshekar Prabhu's classes all the time. And that helps me a lot to understand that there are those closer to Krishna than me who I respect and accept their advice.
There's a nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 54. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk?" So this is our standard, our ideal, whatever word you want to use. We look around, we see how Vaisheshika Prabhu walks, what he vibrates, how he sits. We have this great advantage. We have devotees association, and we check devotees out. This is how we know. We see how Anupama Prabhu walks, how he sits, and then we know where to go. Adipusha Prabhu, Arjuna Prabhu, Bhima Prabhu, Henry Prabhu, everybody. We look around and we see. That's how we know, right? Anupama Prabhu, is that okay?
Yes, I just watch you. I watch you and do what. Srila
Anupama
Prabhupada.
Prabhu ki jai,
Srila
Vaisheshika Prabhu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, never ending Srimad Bhagavatam class ki jai. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for keeping your cameras on. Henry, Haribol, Prabhu, Bhima Prabhu, Angel, Andrea. Thank you very much. Love you all. Hare Krishna, Haribol. Poetry.